The chlorine-scented air hung thick with tension as Karen's shrill voice cut through the summer afternoon like a blade. "You have no trade right to be in that pool," she screamed, her face twisted with rage as she pointed a trembling finger at Maya, who floated defiantly in the crystal blue water. What started as a peaceful swim was about to become a neighborhood war that would expose dark secrets, shatter friendships, and prove that sometimes the loudest voice belongs to the person with the most to hide. Maya had no idea that turning up her music would be the spark that ignited a fire that would consume. Maya Rodriguez had been counting down the days until summer break for months. But she never imagined her first afternoon of freedom would begin with a scream that could wake the dead. The water felt like silk against her skin as she executed a perfect backstroke across the length of the pool, her dark hair fanning out behind her like seaweed. The new community pool had been the talk of Willowbrook Gardens for weeks gleaming, addition to their modest middle-class neighborhood that promised to be the crown jewel of summer entertainment. Maya had waited patiently for the grand opening, watching through her bedroom window as construction crews laid the final tiles and installed the pristine filtration system. She'd been in the water for maybe 20 minutes, lost in the meditative rhythm of her strokes, when the voice shattered her peace like a hammer through glass. Excuse me," Maya stopped mid-stroke, treading water as she turned toward the sound. A woman stood at the pool's edge, her hands planted firmly on her hips, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features into a permanent scowl. Maya recognized her immediately. Karen Whitmore from 1247 Maple Lane, the woman who'd made headlines in the neighborhood newsletter for filing 17 noise complaints in a single month. "Can I help you?" Maya called out, shielding her eyes from the sun as she tried to read Karen's expression. "You most certainly can." Karen's voice carried the kind of authority that suggested she was used to being obeyed without question. "You can get out of this pool immediately." Maya blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me perfectly well, young lady. This pool is for residents only, and I happen to know for a fact that you don't belong here." The accusation hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd lived on Oakwood Drive 3 blocks from Karen's house for 8 years. She'd walked past Karen's perfectly manicured lawn. Every day on her way to Jefferson High, she'd even helped Karen's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, carry groceries up her front steps more times than she could count. "I live here," Maya said, her voice steady despite the confusion churning in her stomach. "I've lived here since I was 10 years old." Karen's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Oh, please. I know every single person in this neighborhood, and I've never seen you before in my life." Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks, not from the sun, but from the familiar sting of being invisible in her own community. It was the same feeling she'd gotten when Mrs. Patterson from the corner house had asked her if she was visiting family. At last year's block party, despite Maya having lived there for 7 years at that point, the same feeling she'd gotten when Officer Martinez had questioned her for loitering outside her own house because she'd been waiting for her mom to come home with the keys. "I live at 892 Oakwood Drive," Maya said, her voice gaining strength. "My family has lived there for 8 years. We pay our HOA fees just like everyone else." Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "I don't care what elaborate story you've concocted. The fact remains that this pool is for community residents only, and you clearly don't belong here." Maya's hands clenched into fists beneath the water. She'd dealt with this kind of suspicion before, but never so blatantly, never with such aggressive certainty. The worst part wasn't even Karen's accusation, it was the small crowd that had begun to gather around the pool area. Neighbors emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion like moths to a flame. She recognized most of the faces, Mr. Thompson from 2 houses down, who always waved when she jogged past his driveway. The Martinez family from across the street, whose daughter Sophia was in Maya's chemistry class, Mrs. Patterson, who was pretending to water her garden while obviously eavesdropping. None of them stepped forward to vouch for her. None of them said a word. "Look," Maya said, swimming closer to the edge where Karen stood like a sentinel. "I don't know what your problem is, but I have every right to be here. If you want to see my proof of residency, I can go get it, but I'm not getting out of this pool just because you say so." Karen's face flushed a deep red that clashed violently with her pink polo shirt. "How dare you speak to me that way? I am a founding member of this community association. I've lived here for 15 years. I know who belongs and who doesn't, and you young lady, do not belong." Maya's patience finally snapped. 8 years of microaggressions, 8 years of being treated like an outsider in her own neighborhood, 8 years of keeping her head down and trying not to cause trouble, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect, blazing clarity. "You know what?" Maya said, her voice carrying across the pool area with surprising power. "You're right about one thing. You've been here 15 years, which means you've had 15 years to learn the names of your neighbors. 15 years to actually pay attention to the people around you instead of just assuming they don't belong, because they don't look like you." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. "You can't, that's not, but here's the thing. Karen," Maya continued, using the woman's name with deliberate familiarity. "I know exactly who you are. Karen Whitmore, 1247 Maple Lane. You're the one who called the police on Mr. Johnson for suspicious activity when he was planting flowers in his own front yard. You're the one who tried to get the Patel family's Diwali celebration shut down for noise violations. You're the one who ENOUGH." Karen's scream was so shrill that several people in the gathering crowd actually took a step back. "I don't have to listen to this from some little delinquent who's trespassing in our community pool." Maya felt something cold and hard settle. In her chest, she'd tried reason, she'd tried politeness, she'd tried standing up for herself with dignity and restraint. But Karen wasn't interested in any of that. Karen was interested in power, in control, in making sure that people like Maya knew their place. Fine, if that's how Karen wanted to play it, Maya was more than happy to oblige. Without breaking eye contact, Maya reached for her phone, which she'd left on a towel at the pool's edge. Karen watched suspiciously as Maya scrolled through her music app, selected a playlist, and connected to the pool area's Bluetooth speakers, a feature she'd helped test the week before during the community setup day that Karen had apparently missed. The first beats of Fight Song by Rachel Platten began to pulse through the speakers, filling the pool area with defiant energy. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen demanded. Maya smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. "I'm swimming in my community pool while listening to my music. Is there a problem with that?" Karen's face had progressed from red to purple. "Turn that off immediately. There are noise ordinances. There are rules. Actually," Maya said, settling into a leisurely backstroke, "according to the community guidelines, which I actually read, unlike some people, music is permitted in the pool area until 8 p.m., as long as it's not offensive. And unless you have a problem with empowerment anthems, I think we're good." The song swelled, and Maya began to sing along, her voice carrying across the water with clear, confident notes. Several of the younger neighbors who'd gathered to watch began to nod along to the beat. Mrs. Chen's grandson gave Maya a thumbs up from behind his grandmother's wheelchair. Karen looked around frantically, as if expecting the crowd to rise up in support of her position. Instead, she found curious faces, some amused, some uncomfortable, but none offering the righteous indignation she clearly expected. "This is harassment," Karen declared, pulling out her own phone. "I'm calling the police." Maya didn't stop swimming, didn't stop singing. "Go ahead. I'd love to explain to Officer Martinez why you think I don't belong in my own neighborhood." Karen's finger hovered over her phone screen, and for a moment, Maya wondered if she'd pushed too far. But then she remembered the look in Karen's eyes when she'd first demanded Maya leave. The pool, not just annoyance or confusion, but genuine disgust, as if Maya's very presence was somehow contaminating the pristine community space. No, she hadn't pushed too far. If anything, she hadn't pushed far enough. As the song reached its chorus, Maya's voice grew stronger, more defiant. Other neighbors began to drift closer to the pool area, drawn by the music and the obvious tension. Maya recognized the Hendersons from 4 houses down, the college students who rented the duplex on Elm Street, even old Mr. Kowalski, who usually never left his front porch. Karen stood frozen at the pool's edge, her phone still in her hand, her face a mask of frustrated rage. She'd expected Maya to cower, to apologize, to slink away in shame. Instead, she'd gotten a full-throated declaration of belonging broadcast through high-quality speakers for the entire neighborhood to hear. Fine, Karen Finn stayed in the water long after Karen's dramatic exit, floating on her back while Confident by Demi Lovato pulsed through the speakers. Several neighbors had actually approached her. Mrs. Chun's grandson had given her a shy wave. The Henderson Twins had asked if they could request a song, and even Mr. Kowalski had shuffled over to tell her she had pipes like his late wife used to. But Maya should have known that Karen Whitmore wasn't the type to retreat quietly into the night, water streaming from her red bikini as she reached for her towel. The Willowbrook Gardens Community Facebook group was Karen's natural habitated digital space where she held court. Over discussions about property values, parking regulations, and the appropriate height for garden gnomes, Maya rarely checked it, finding the constant complaints and passive-aggressive announcements more depressing than informative. With trembling fingers, she opened the app and navigated to the group page. What she found made her blood run cold. This individual became verbally abusive when questioned about her right to be there. Concerned about security breach and potential liability issues, HOA board meeting emergency session requested. We cannot allow our safe community space to be compromised by outsiders who think rules don't apply to them. Hashtag community first, hashtag safety first. Maya scrolled through them, her heart sinking with each response. Barbara Chen. I saw the whole thing from my window. Very concerning behavior. Robert Patterson. Do we even know who this person is? Should we call security? Linda Martinez. I think we need better screening procedures for pool access. David Thompson. Why was she allowed to connect to our community speakers? That seems like a security issue. But then Maya noticed something else. Not every comment was supportive of Karen's narrative. Jake Henderson. Wasn't this the girl who helped my mom with her groceries last month? Sophia Martinez Collins. Wait, isn't that Maya? She's been in my chemistry class for 2 years. Her family lives on Oakwood. Michael Chen. She helped my grandmother multiple times. Very respectful young lady. Emma Kowalski. My grandfather said she has a beautiful voice. What's the real story here? The comments section was turning into a battlefield, with neighbors choosing sides based on incomplete information and personal biases. Maya felt sick watching her life become the subject of community debate, her character dissected by people who'd barely acknowledged her existence before today. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. Coming home early, we need to talk. Maya's hands shook as she gathered her things. Dr. Sofia Rodriguez was not someone who left work early without a very good reason. Someone had already called her mother, probably Karen herself. Armed with righteous indignation and a carefully crafted version of events, the walk home felt like a death march. Maya could feel eyes on her from behind curtained windows, sensed the neighborhood's growing awareness of the drama unfolding in their midst. By the time she reached 892 Oakwood Drive, her mother's silver Honda was already in the driveway. Dr. Rodriguez was waiting in the kitchen, still wearing her hospital scrubs, her expression unreadable. At 42, she was a striking woman. My life and death decisions in pediatric emergency rooms. Sit, she said simply. Her mother sat across from her, hands folded, waiting. I got a call at work today, Dr. Rodriguez began, her voice carefully neutral. From a woman named Karen Whitmore. She was very upset. She claimed that you were trespassing in the community pool, that you became hostile when confronted, and that you were playing loud music to disturb the peace. Maya opened her mouth to defend herself, but her mother held up a hand. I also got a call from Mrs. Chen, who said you handled yourself with remarkable dignity in the face of completely inappropriate accusations. I got a text from Sophia Martinez, who vouched for your character. And I got a visit from Mr. Kowalski, who walked over here specifically to tell me how proud he was of how you stood up for yourself. Dr. Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, studying her daughter's face. So I'm going to ask you once, and I want the complete truth. What happened at the pool today? Maya took a deep breath and told her mother everything. The moment when she decided to stop being invisible and start being heard, when she finished. Show me the Facebook post, she said finally. Maya handed over her phone, watching her mother's expression darken as she read Karen's version of events. Dr. Rodriguez scrolled through the comments, her jaw tightening with each increasingly hostile response. This woman posted a photo of you without your consent, she said, her voice dangerously calm, and she's doing it because she made a racist assumption and got called out for it. Maya blinked, preferring to discuss unconscious bias or cultural misunderstandings. Nothing that could be explained away as a simple misunderstanding. What do we do? Maya asked. Dr. Rodriguez stood up, moving to the kitchen window that faced Karen's house. We fight back, but we do it smart, and we do it right. Over the next hour, Maya watched her mother transform from concerned parent to strategic general. Dr. Rodriguez made phone calls first to the HOA president, then to several longtime neighbors, then to someone Maya couldn't identify but who seemed to have significant influence in community affairs. The emergency HOA meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night, Dr. Rodriguez announced after her final call. Karen pushed for it, thinking she could use mob mentality to force some kind of disciplinary action. Maya stared at her mother. "You're going to run for the HOA board. I was considering it before today. We've lived here for 8 years, and in that time, definition of belongs here. The Johnsons were harassed until they moved. The Patels were constantly reported for violations that turned out to be perfectly legal cultural practices. Mrs. Chen has been treated like a foreign curiosity instead of the retired professor of literature that she is." Dr. Rodriguez moved to the kitchen counter, where she kept a folder of important documents. She pulled out several papers, property deeds, HOA payment records, community volunteer certificates. "But Karen made a mistake today," she continued. "She assumed that you were powerless, that your family was powerless, that she could make accusations without consequences. What she doesn't know is that your trespassing mother has been the largest single donor to community improvement projects. For the past 3 years, she doesn't know that I've been invited to join the HOA board multiple times and declined because I was too busy saving children's lives." Maya felt a surge of pride mixed with something darker. Anticipation had picked the wrong family to mess with. "I made some calls to colleagues who live in other neighborhoods. Karen Whitmore has a history. She was asked to leave her previous HOA position after multiple discrimination complaints. She's been reported to the city 3 times for harassment of minority families," Maya asked. Her mother smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant, the kind that could end her reign as neighborhood watchdog permanently. That evening, Maya watched from her bedroom window as unusual activity began to unfold across Willowbrook Gardens. Cars she didn't recognize were pulling into driveways. Neighbors who typically kept to themselves were gathering in small groups on sidewalks, gesturing animatedly as they talked. The Hendersons had a steady stream of visitors, as did the Martinez family, and surprisingly, old Mr. Kowalski. Maya's phone buzzed constantly with messages from classmates who'd seen the Facebook drama unfold. "Zoe, your mom is iconic. Did you see her comment on Karen's post?" Maya quickly checked Facebook. Her mother had indeed commented, and it was a masterpiece of diplomatic warfare. "Dr. Sofia Rodriguez here. I'm disappointed to see my daughter being publicly maligned based on false assumptions. Maya has lived in this community for 8 years and has every right to use facilities her family helps fund. I'll be addressing this Matt." The Willowbrook Gardens Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. Maya arrived with her mother at exactly 7 o'clock, 30 minutes before the scheduled HOA meeting, and found the parking lot already packed. Cars lined the street for 2 blocks in either direction, and she could see neighbors streaming toward the building from every corner of the subdivision. What should have been a routine administrative gathering had transformed into the social event of the year. "Remember," Dr. Rodriguez said as they walked toward the entrance, "we let them talk first. Give them enough rope." Maya nodded, though her stomach was churning with nervous energy. She'd barely slept the night before, replaying every possible scenario in her head. The Facebook post had continued to generate comments throughout the night, with the community clearly split into factions. Maya had counted at least 40 people defending her right to use the pool. But Karen's supporters had been equally vocal, demanding accountability and proper procedures. The community center's main room was set up with folding chairs in neat rows facing a long table where the HOA board typically sat. Tonight, that table seemed inadequate for the crowd that was gathering. Maya estimated at least 100 people had shown up, unprecedented for a neighborhood that usually struggled to get a dozen residents to attend quarterly meetings. Karen was already there, of course, holding court near the front of the room, with a cluster of supporters that Maya recognized as the neighborhood's unofficial complaint committee. Barbara Patterson was there, along with the Millers from Elm Street and several other longtime residents who'd made careers out of monitoring everyone else's business. Karen had dressed for battle, a navy blazer over white slacks, her hair styled into an aggressive bob that made her look like a campaign manager for suburban warfare. But Maya was surprised to see how many unfamiliar faces filled the room. Neighbors she'd never spoken to, families she'd only seen in passing, teenagers from school whose parents had apparently decided this was worth their attention. The energy in the room was electric, charged with the kind of tension that comes when a community is forced to confront uncomfortable truths about itself. Maya. She turned to see Sofia Martinez waving from across the room. Her chemistry classmate was sitting with her parents and what looked like several other families with teenage children. Sofia gestured for Maya to come over, and as she approached, Maya realized she was walking into what amounted to a solidarity section. "We saved you seats," Sofia said, scooting over to make room. "My mom is furious about what happened. So is Mrs. Chen and the Hendersons, and basically everyone with functioning brain cells." Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her, a mix of longtime residents and newer families, different ethnicities and ages, but all united by what seemed to be genuine outrage over Karen's behavior. It was the first time in 8 years that Maya had felt like she truly belonged in a room full of her neighbors. "Maya, honey," said Mrs. Chen, reaching over to squeeze her hand, "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that yesterday. That woman has been a problem for years." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. Mrs. Chen's expression darkened. "She tried to get my grandson in trouble for loitering when he was waiting for me after school, called the police on the Johnson family for having a loud party. During their daughter's graduation celebration at 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday, she's reported the Patels to the city at least 5 times for code violations that never existed. She filed a complaint against us for having too many cars in our driveway when my sister's family visited for Christmas," added Carlos Henderson, as if family gatherings were somehow illegal. Maya felt a familiar mix of validation and sadness. She wasn't the first person Karen had targeted, just the latest in a long line of neighbors who'd been made to feel unwelcome in their own community. At exactly 7:30, HOA President Richard Sterling called the meeting to order. Sterling was a mild-mannered accountant in his 60s who'd held the position for 3 years, mainly because no one else wanted the responsibility of managing neighborhood drama. Tonight, he looked like a man who deeply regretted his civic involvement. "We're here for an emergency session called by board member Karen Whitmore regarding an incident at the community pool," Sterling announced, his voice barely audible over the crowd's murmur. "Karen, you have the floor." Karen stood with the confidence of someone who'd spent years dominating community meetings. She walked to the front of the room like a prosecutor approaching a jury, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. "Thank you, Richard neighbors. I come before you tonight with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. Yesterday, our community's safety and security were compromised by an individual who not only violated our pool access policies but became verbally abusive. When questioned about her authorization to be there, Maya felt Dr. Rodriguez tensed beside her, but her mother remained silent, waiting. "This isn't about any one person," Karen continued, her voice rising with practiced indignation. "This is about maintaining the standards and security that make Willowbrook Gardens the safe, family-friendly community we all chose to live in. When we allow unauthorized individuals to use our facilities, when we enable aggressive behavior toward residents who are simply trying to maintain order, we open ourselves to liability issues, safety concerns, and the deterioration of the community, values we've worked so hard to build." A murmur of agreement rose from Karen's section of supporters, but Maya noticed it was smaller and less enthusiastic than Karen had probably expected. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, Karen pressed on. "I've served on this board, I've organized community events. I've been the person willing to ask the hard questions and make the difficult decisions that others won't make. And I'm telling you that what happened yesterday was not just a violation of our rules, it was a direct challenge to the authority and order that keeps this community functioning." Karen paused dramatically, scanning the room as if daring anyone to contradict her. "I'm requesting that the board implement immediate measures to ensure this kind of incident never happens again. Enhanced security protocols for pool access, stricter enforcement of residency verification, and consequences for individuals who disrupt community peace through hostile behavior." She sat down to scattered applause from her supporters, but the response was notably lukewarm. Maya could feel the shift in the room's energy. Karen's speech had been too aggressive, too focused on punishment and control rather than community building. Sterling looked uncomfortable as he consulted his notes. "Thank you, Karen. Before we discuss potential policy changes, I think we should hear from all parties involved. Dr. Rodriguez, would you like to respond?" Dr. Rodriguez stood slowly, and Maya noticed how the room seemed too quiet with respect. Her mother's reputation carried real weight in this community. She'd saved several of these neighbors' children over the years, had been the go-to medical resource during the COVID pandemic, had quietly donated money for playground improvements and holiday decorations without seeking recognition. "Thank you, Richard. Neighbors, I want to start by saying that I'm disappointed we're here tonight under these circumstances, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to address some serious issues that have been allowed to fester in our community." For far too long, Dr. Rodriguez didn't walk to the front of the room like Karen had. Instead, she remained standing among the neighbors, speaking as one of them rather than positioning herself as an authority figure lecturing down to the masses. "My daughter Maya has lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. In that time, she's helped elderly neighbors with groceries, babysat for working parents, participated in community cleanup days, and maintained a 3.9 GPA while contributing to our local school's academic reputation. She's never been the subject of a single complaint or incident report until yesterday." Dr. Rodriguez's voice remained calm, but Maya could hear the steel. Underneath what happened yesterday wasn't a security breach or a policy violation. It was a 17-year-old girl being confronted and humiliated by an adult who made assumptions based on appearance rather than facts. When Karen demanded that Maya prove her right to exist in her own neighborhood, Maya responded with dignity and truth. When Karen escalated the confrontation, Maya chose music over violence, joy over anger. A few people in the audience actually applauded, and Maya felt heat rising in her cheeks. "But this isn't really about pool access or noise complaints," Dr. Rodriguez continued. "This is about what kind of community we want to be. Do we want to be a place where longtime residents feel empowered to interrogate and intimidate anyone who doesn't immediately fit their expectations? Do we want to be a place where our children grow up feeling like they have to constantly prove they belong in their own neighborhood?" Dr. Rodriguez paused, letting the questions hang in the air. "I've been quiet about these issues for too long. I've watched good families leave this neighborhood because they were tired of being treated as perpetual outsiders. I've seen children develop anxiety about playing in their own yards because they're afraid of triggering another complaint. I've received calls from other medical professionals asking me about the culture of this community because they've heard disturbing sounds." Through her window, she could see a fire truck, 2 police cars, and what looked like a hazmat van parked directly in front of her house. "Maya," her mother's voice called from downstairs, sharp with urgency. "Get dressed and come down here." Now Maya threw on jeans and a t-shirt, her mind racing through possibilities. Had there been an accident? A gas leak? Some kind of emergency that would require evacuating the neighborhood at dawn? She found her mother in the living room, still in her pajamas. To someone on the phone, while gesturing frantically at the window, Dr. Rodriguez's face was pale, but determined the same expression Maya had seen during medical emergencies, when her mother shifted into crisis management mode. "What's happening?" Maya asked. Dr. Rodriguez held up a finger, finishing her conversation before hanging up and turning to face her daughter. "Someone called in a report that our house is being used as a drug lab." Maya's jaw dropped. "It's what an anonymous tip to. The police at 5:15 this morning claimed there were suspicious chemical smells, unusual activity at odd hours, and people coming and going at all times of day and night." Dr. Rodriguez's voice was deadly calm. The caller specifically mentioned concern about dangerous substances being manufactured in a residential area with children nearby. The implications hit Maya like a freight train. Karen, her mother confirmed, though proving it will be difficult since the tip was anonymous. Maya sank onto the couch, watching through the window as neighbors emerged from their houses to gawk at the emergency vehicles surrounding her home. This was exactly what Karen had wanted: humiliation, community suspicion, the kind of scandal that would make the Rodriguez family pariahs in their own neighborhood. "Can they search the house?" Maya asked. "They already have a warrant," Dr. Rodriguez said grimly. Based on the anonymous tip, and the callers claimed that they witnessed chemical deliveries and detected unusual odors, the judge who signed it. A knock at the front door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Rodriguez straightened her pajama top and went to answer it. Maya, trailing behind her, A tired-looking police officer stood on their porch, flanked by two men in hazmat suits and what appeared to be a drug enforcement specialist with a German shepherd. The officer looked profoundly uncomfortable. "Dr. Rodriguez, I'm Officer Patel. I'm really sorry about this, but we received a report of possible illegal drug manufacturing at this address. We have a warrant to search the premises." Dr. Rodriguez stepped aside to let them in. "Of course, officer, I understand you're just doing your job. Though I have to say, as someone who's worked with law enforcement on child abuse cases for over a decade, this feels like harassment disguised as police work." Officer Patel's discomfort visibly increased. "Ma'am, we have to follow up on all reports of this nature. Public safety concern? Absolutely. Though I'm curious, did your anonymous tipster happen to mention that I'm the head of pediatrics at Mercy General, or that the chemical deliveries they witnessed were probably my medical supplies and prescription samples that I sometimes bring home to organize for our free clinic?" Maya watched Officer Patel's expression shift as he processed this information. The drug dog was already sniffing around their living room, tail wagging friendly as it investigated their couch cushions without showing any signs of alerting to illegal substances. "The chemical smells they detected," Dr. Rodriguez continued conversationally, "are likely from the antiseptic hand sanitizers and cleaning supplies I use obsessively because, I work in a hospital and we're still dealing with a global pandemic." The hazmat team was moving through their house with professional efficiency, testing surfaces and air quality with expensive-looking equipment. Maya felt violated watching strangers examine her family's private space, rifling through cabinets and drawers in search of evidence that didn't exist, or the residents I mentor who occasionally need guidance. On difficult cases, Officer Patel was taking notes, but Maya could see him growing more skeptical of the anonymous report with each explanation. The drug dog had completed its circuit of the main floor without indicating any illegal substances, and the hazmat team's readings were presumably coming back negative for dangerous chemicals. By the time the search concluded an hour later, the team had found exactly what Dr. Rodriguez had predicted they would find: medical supplies, hospital-grade cleaning products, research materials, and absolutely nothing that could be construed as evidence of illegal drug manufacturing. Officer Patel approached Dr. Rodriguez as his team prepared to leave. "Ma'am, I want to apologize for this inconvenience. The report was obviously unfounded. Unfortunately, we're required to follow up on all tips of this nature, but I want you to know that this doesn't reflect any suspicion on our part about you or your family, possibly motivated by personal animosity rather than genuine safety concerns." "Absolutely. And Dr. Rodriguez, for what it's worth, my daughter was one of your patients 3 years ago when she had that severe allergic reaction. You saved her life." Dr. Rodriguez's expression softened. "Priya Patel, how is she doing?" "Thriving, thanks to you, which is why. This whole thing makes me so angry. You're one of the good ones, and whoever called this in was clearly trying to cause trouble." As the police vehicles finally pulled away from their house, Maya and her mother stood in their driveway surveying the damage. Their yard was trampled. Their privacy was shattered, and their neighbors were staring from windows and doorways with expressions ranging from concern to suspicion to outright hostility. But there was something else in the air, a sense of outrage from the neighbors, who knew them well, who understood that this was exactly the kind of escalation they should have expected after last night's meeting. "This is war," Maya said quietly. "No," her mother replied, her voice carrying a cold fury that Maya had never heard before. "This is desperation. Karen just made the biggest mistake of her life." Dr. Rodriguez pulled out her phone and began making calls. Maya listened as her mother spoke to someone who sounded like a lawyer, then to someone who was clearly a contact at the police department, then to someone who seemed to be a journalist. "What are you doing?" Maya asked when her mother finally hung up. "I'm done playing defense," Dr. Rodriguez said. "Karen wants to escalate. Fine. But she picked the wrong family to wage psychological warfare against." Over the next few hours, Maya watched her mother orchestrate a response that was both swift and devastating. The lawyer confirmed that filing a false police report was a felony, especially when it involved false accusations of drug manufacturing. The police contact provided assurance that they would investigate the source of the anonymous tip, particularly given the timing relative to the previous night's HOA meeting. The journalist was very interested in a story about community harassment targeting a respected pediatrician and her teenage daughter. But Dr. Rodriguez wasn't finished. "Get dressed nicely," she told Maya. "We're going visiting." Their first stop was Mrs. Chen's house, where Maya's elderly neighbor was waiting with tea and homemade cookies, her grandson Jake standing protectively beside her wheelchair. "I saw the police cars this morning," Mrs. Chen said without preamble. "I've been in this country for 40 years, and I know exactly what that was about. Someone wanted to humiliate your family." "We think so too," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "But we're going to need witnesses if we're going to prove it." "Whatever you need," Jake said firmly. "Everyone on this street knows you're good people." What happened this morning was disgusting. Their next stop was the Henderson house, where Carlos and Maria were waiting with similar expressions of outrage. Maya learned that several neighbors had gathered that morning to compare notes about the police raid, and the consensus was unanimous. This was retaliation for last night's meeting. "Karen's been calling people all morning," Maria Henderson revealed, trying to convince everyone that the police search proves she was right about your family being problematic, but it's backfiring. "People aren't stupid. They know harassment when they see it." The pattern continued at every house they visited. The Martinez family, the Kowalskis, even some neighbors Maya barely knew expressed support and anger about the morning's events. More importantly, several people had specific information about Karen's activities in the past 24 hours. "She was on my porch at 7 last night," reported Mrs. Sullivan from Maple Lane, "trying to get me to sign some kind of petition about community safety concerns. When I refused, she got very aggressive, said I'd regret not supporting my own neighbors. She called me at 11:30 last night," added Mr. Kim from Elm Street, "wanted to know if I'd seen any unusual activity at your house. When I told her that was none of her business, she implied that I wasn't being a responsible community member." By late afternoon, Dr. Rodriguez had compiled a timeline of Karen's post-meeting activities that painted a clear picture of orchestrated